Yeah, and we're on. So, welcome to tonight's talk show. Talk/show. No, maybe discussion. As I said in the invite, this is actually something that we did during the summer, but there was a lot of things happening with the placing containers and everything, and it sort of got drowned out. So I thought we should just have a quick look at it once more to so that we're up to speed with what's possible, because I think it's pretty good functionality overall. So I'm gonna present my screen. Hi Dennis, Alex.
Hi Dennis.
How are you doing?
Hi.
Yeah, hello. We're okay.
Hello. Yeah, we're good.
Good.
They actually have a new thing now. They're using their iPhone as a camera, I think. Maybe not now, but usually they have so good picture. Maybe that's something for Philip to do.
It's the most expensive camera ever.
Yeah.
I will look into that, Lars.
All right, let's see. Okay, maybe these were the old ones. I'm gonna delete some stuff here because that was left from my last installs. Like that. Yes, everyone sees my screen, right? And what I wanted to mention and bring up today, and feel free to discuss it and think about what the implications are as I show this. But as from this summer, we have introduced the ability to show SVG graphics not only as like static images in assets like assets.tk to link to them, but also as data. And since SVG is a XML format, it opens up possibilities to actually change graphics that you put on screen to have it working. And the new thing that we introduced this summer and made it better in many ways was that it's possible to do in WPF as well, so that we can steer away from using SAML and instead using SVG as a blanket graphic solution for everything needing simple graphics. And of course, as always, you can always do anything with the components and injecting more complex stuff that you build yourself. But this is out of the box and an easy thing to play around with, that I think it's pretty neat. And what you need to do is basically to add some kind of display field. So I'm just gonna add a generic column and put that over here, and I'm gonna make that a little bigger. And in order to make it to explain to the renderer that this is should be interpreted as an SVG, we need to give it a tagged value, and it's actually the blob type tagged value that we're using for this. And we can choose one of the valid values here. So this one is the old one for SAML symbol. It only worked in WPF. Image is of course image, that will interpret the content here as a byte array consisting of a PNG or JPEG image. Blob is nondescript, so that's probably something we use for having real documents or binary data of some kind. Rich text also currently only works in WPF to bring up the rich text editor and also the rich text format. So it's really these three that are the important ones. But the SVG, as we classify this new column as the tag value for echo blob type to SVG, we should maybe see some change here. At least I thought so. So having that possibility, you can then find the SVG data, and there's plenty of it online. I found this neat little SVG online editor, so I can just sort of have a blank canvas and choose elements and grab something from here. So I can, yeah, I guess I can zoom in on that one. I'm gonna put them up in this corner because we need to pay for this tool in order to resize the canvas and stuff. At least I think that's the way it's supposed to work. So how come I can't scroll it? No, it went black. Well, like that. So let's say that I have I'll put some hearts over here. Yeah. And then I can download that as a SVG. And if I were to open that, show in folder, and open that with Notepad, I see that it's XML based data in SVG format. So this is probably one of the hearts, this is the other one, and etc. So since that is all valid data consisting of defining one SVG thing image, I would be able to paste that in as a string here. And of course, if I can do this, you can imagine that that data could come in from anywhere. It could be from our database or from some logic or method that we have, but I'm going to do it like this for starters. And now we see that the designer says this is SVG from data, and saving that and pressing play and turning on the XML prototyper in WPF and going to view one thing, I can see that well, I have the hearts over here, so probably we want to do some changes to this XML. I think this one is forcing it to be really big, and I don't want that. I'm going to clean that up. And heading back here to doing a refresh. Now it's more to the point where I want it. And so that's in WPF, and let's look how it would be in HTML. Starting the turnkey prototyper. And so that's how it looks in HTML. So having this as pure data, we can do things like since this is just a string, and so maybe we would like to, let's see, where does one thing start and another one end? Yeah, so this is one heart and this is another one. So I can end the string here, and yeah, maybe we want always to show one heart, and I'm gonna end the string here, and this second string I'm gonna make that optional then. So let's say that we have self sum int should be bigger than 2, case true or false, and a parenthesis string around that. I'm gonna split this string as well in order to catch it here. So it needs 2 arguments, either it's true and then we do all of this, or it's not true and we do that. So that would be one way to inject expression into our SVG text. And of course we could continue to do this inside this one. So I'm going to split this string as well, and pretty much do the same, but we're going to say if it's bigger than 3. Then we're going to do all this, and let's see, where am I now? And if it's not that, I'm going to do an empty string like that. So having done that, simple change, and heading back to here, if I put 0 here, I get 1 heart, and 1, yeah, 1, always 1 heart, and 2, it didn't exactly work as I expected, but I think it's not the logic, it's wrong. That's wrong, it's me that I did something wrong when I thought about this. But this make it possible for us to sort of do interactive graphic based on the data, really simple. And that's something that we, of course, have been able to do, but it has been cumbersome and complex. And we can think about doing simple diagrams and pie charts and things like that, really easy to get things going. And SVG is sort of gaining in popularity. One might have expected that something else should take over, but since it's a vector format, it doesn't, it behaves really well even if we scale things. It's a good fit for being on different devices like mobiles and things like that. And often nowadays when you go to some stock describing websites, the diagrams are always in SVG, because they need to be dynamic, and you want logic to, when you point on things like that, it would give you more labels, and that's possible to do also with JavaScript injects. But this is a really powerful way to get more graphics into your UI that I think we should use more of. So if I use this one, it behaves the same. And there's of course a lot of stuff written about SVG and different things that you want to draw, so it's a real well, I wouldn't say it's super easy, but it's straightforward. And of course we could just as well put this in a parameterized method to get a cleaner, if this really was something that we wanted to do, we could just lift this out and create a method of it instead on the class thing. Yeah, maybe this one is... It's something when I run the Camtasia, it grabs the quick keys. So if the body of this just initially sends back this string, and the method would have a signature of returning a string, but it would also have a position in X position as an integer. Then I could probably figure out which of these values is it that denotes the X position of this. So it's a little bit tricky, but I would say it's translate X12. So I would say it's this one. No. So this is a metric for transforming. So one way to understand this would to be to check the difference between the first one and the second one. And if I check, so this matrix is 25, 1, 3, 4, this is 57, and the difference here is about what? Yeah, it's 22. No, 27. So let's say that we go back to this one and say that the first one should be at 20 times our expos, but this was a string, so I'm going to end the string here and have this as a string. And of course, if you don't like mixing and building strings like this, it's possible to use the format, or even we could use the template function to produce XML templates that we use for sending emails or HTML emails and stuff. You could use that as well to have tags in here to expand with the open document report as HTML or something like that. But this, every time I send in an expos, it will multiply by 20 and return that in the position where I hope it will be another one. So we will move this along. At least I think so. I haven't tested this. So
you might have to alter the ID number of the object. I don't know if it's happy with having two.
Yeah, so it might get a duplicate identity here. So
yeah, you have an ID on the top row there. I guess
let's
that
see.
might.
I think it's more or less only for for the program to return to the generator, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So let's see.
We'll see.
I'm gonna call this art, and if this is true, I can then instead of having this string here, I'm going to remove that and instead do self.heart1. Yeah, and since this is a query, I need to define my method as a query method. Otherwise it will only initially work as an action language, but this doesn't change any data, so it might as well be a query. and that makes it possible to use it in the expression like this. And let's see if I were to also then remove this string and instead return heart from 2. So not to overdo it, heading back over here, refresh. Oh, so if I have 1, if I have 2, yeah, so it's a new behavior. So I think we're on a good path. So I would just continue to replace this. If I don't want this string, I'm still figuring out what I did wrong. So this will do 0 or 1. Oh, this is bigger than 2, bigger than 3. Yeah, maybe. So instead of this, I would do like that. So heart 1, if it's bigger than 2, it will do this one, and if it's bigger than 3, it will do the third one. Yay. So 2, 3, 4. So what do you think about that? Pretty neat.
Pretty nice. Off by 1, but still nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna change. And of course, that's just one of the examples. You could do any type of complex thing with this. I think I had some good examples here where people actually more or less state the code on how to do a sector path in a pie chart, and if you do that, you could use OCL to generate something that equals this to create pie charts for data that you have in a list, for example. So that's good. Let's take another example on what I had some dummy data that I thought was interesting, but let's see if I can find it.
I think one of the nice things with SVG is that you can actually understand it, I mean, just by looking at it. And it's also very, very efficient in time, in terms of how bandwidth or how much it takes. So actually, if you would have graphics all along in a list, it's so little that it's you can add it to hundreds of rows and show it in a UI, instead of having a quite bulky, maybe JavaScript render thing in the browser, and then it also becomes available on different platforms. Although you could argue that this copy and pasting strings like this looks a bit ugly, which is true, but you could also then use, as Hans said, the templating things. You put the design of the graphics in a field, like in a singleton system, so that there you keep the graphics, and then you just search replace kind of the data that you want, for example, a percentage in a progress bar, and that way you have a very efficient way of showing graphics that can be even manipulated by the end user. So if you want to change the styling or the design of something, you can just change it in this global text field.
Yeah, and parameterize it to send in data to change colors or how many you have or anything like that. And even if pasting strings is, if you're reluctant to do that, it's still the way of the web. Everything is a pasted HTML string in the end that is sent to the browser. So of course it's easy to lose track of it, but that's just the way that we convey data. And as Lars says, even if this looks as a lot, it's nothing compared to the same thing if this would have been a PNG picture, because then it would have been like 10 or 15 pages like this with numbers.
Yeah, and if that looks a bit complex to understand, it might be worth to mention that SVG has primitives for things like circus boxes, ellipses, and things that are much easier to understand than those generic curves.
Yeah, so probably if you're using tools that I didn't know, you will always get paths, because paths will do anything. But
Exactly.
if you would do it freehand, you would use the primitives that are available in the SVG specification. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm generating reports that way, starting with a blank sheet and generating every text, every line, everything just as SVG, and then dumping it to the user's browser. That works really well.
Yeah, yes, of course, and you can do text and things like that as well. So anything.
Just mind which fonts are available.
Yeah, that might be a limitation. So the news here is that we should consider using this more often for simple things that, and also you can build up your own reoccurring reused logic for doing pie charts or diagrams of different types. And we should also do that as we find them and do them, put them up on the wiki. This is a good method for doing an SVG pie chart. So then you don't need to do a lot of plumbing to pull in a component, and you don't need to worry that it doesn't work in WPF prototyper, it only works in web, or vice versa. So since we now have made the SVG available in WPF, it's I think it's a really good way moving forward with small graphic widgets in our systems. Things like if we look at things like this in Stack Overview that or Stack Overflow, that we have a red dot above an icon. You can do that several ways, but one way is having it as an SVG with some parameterized red ball that should be visible or not, depending on data. Of course, I think this particular case you could equally well do with the placing containers, having the overlay saying that one of the placing containers floats above, and make that visible or hidden depending on some rule. So there's as always many ways to skin a cat, and it's hard to give a generic blanket rule on how to do it, but it's good with multiple options. So what would you do with the SVG graphics as a first thing? Emily, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking about that first thing come to mind was progress bar for like the readiness of an article in the system that I develop, article master. Maybe.
Yeah.
Like when this is done, another green little line is showing, and then it's full when it's all complete, when all of the criteria is full.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Just make it one filled box and make it grow as the percentages increase. That's even simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we often have the need to do small pie charts or small diagrams to some minimal things to show 10 to 15 data points to show a trend or something, and that would be good to be able to have precision in, so that if a user really zooms it will still be good information. And since it's fairly lightweight, you could show it in lists, etc.
Or grids. I was thinking of something similar to in Excel when you do one of those. You have a bunch of values, but you can then kind of put in the background of the values the little scalar bars. I was thinking it'd be good for that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm not sure if the V selected thing works on cell select. I think we did something like that. I don't know if we have that documented. We're gonna look on that, because that would make it possible to do just as in Excel. What I'm thinking about is, once we have multiple values here, one thing that is implemented in WPF, and it's harder on the web because there's no the interaction with the keyboard and everything is different. But if you press F4, you go into like cell select on the WPF grids, and that makes it possible to sort of if you had numbers, you would be able to select these numbers and then have a pop-up showing an SVG of those selected numbers. But I can't remember on the top of my head if this is available, or if this was something we added on in the application that I'm thinking about. But it might be a good thing to be able to distinguish cells. Not sure, since the web we're moving away from, it's not that natural to have editable grids, which is a pity. But it's sort of not the standard on web forms on HTML. It's more that you click something and you get a pop-up and you can change it there. Not like here, that's what more or less what happens. It's a pop-up that is in place, taking the spot of the cell. So I guess it's more or less the same. But things that we have done is to make it easier to copy and paste from sort of Excel to here. So it should be fairly easy to, once you have something like that, to be able to copy that and paste it like this. So that's a few things that we needed to get to work in order to have happy users at one of the projects.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good thing. Once you go into cell select, you can do even like yeah, so you could do pretty much anything back and forth from Excel. And also, as we talk about Excel, we might as well mention, since this is a feature that some might not be obvious. If we were to take this thing object and pull that into here, or rather this one into here, and say self details. We did something to, since we can do F4 here as well to go into cell select, you might want to grab some of these and or rather this the other way around. If you have data in Excel, let's say you have this, and then close this so I see, and then you can get that data from Excel into variable M1, and M1 is one of these predefined. So if you add an expression and just say M1, and that makes it really easy when you're dealing with generating test data, etc., because then you can get loads of names, for example, from Excel into a collection of strings, and then you could loop over this M1 and assign that to different new details. So that's a good thing that I think me and Emily figured out that we should be helped by, going back and forth between Excel and the debugger. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, that might not work. Never mind. Cool. So, Dennis, what do you think about SVG? Is it something you're going to use?
We can use it like for charts and diagrams, but we also use like CSS for diagrams, but
yeah.
is very much simpler. Yeah, I don't want anyone to like overestimate the power of SVG, because if you want something really complex, it will be really complicated to figure out what's going on. But if you want to bind some simple like visual data presentation, yeah, it's a great thing to have.
Yeah, and also since it's a vector format, and now with the placing containers, you might want to put a picture in the background, or data-driven picture in the background of everything on the screen. And since you're not sure about the form factor of the device looking at it, it won't look nice if it's a PNG, or it might be too bloated if it's a PNG. You might, if someone has a large screen, you need to do it really big. So then it's a good thing to do it with the SVG as well. And of course, being able to change the background color according to the face of the moon or something like that via a REST API. That's always...
Well, whether the user is having dark mode on or not, for example?
Yeah, of course, yes. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty much what I had on the agenda for tonight. Lars, do you have anything that we should...
No, not as such. I'm working on performance improvements with, if you have a lot of data in a view, you have more than about 3,000 to 4,000 rows in a view now in turnkey, you will run into performance issues that get worse and worse.
And where is the bottleneck? It's in Angular or in the turnkey server logic?
Turnkey server logic, the ones we talked about for a while there. That the queuing mechanism kind of buckles under the load that keeps track of what to send to the client.
Yeah. So,
but it's actually also, it's not a super thing to do anyway. I mean, to send thousands and thousands of rows to a web client. So it's not like something you should like, yeah, let's do that because it's such a great idea anyway. But we want it for some views or users just, looks like. Instead of developing something different, you just want to shove 10 or 15, 20,000 rows onto the client and do copy paste, like you can do in other things. So we're looking at that. But it is also, it will force improvement in general when it comes to memory usage, I think, with the turnkey server.
And we have a pretty good understanding on what it is that goes on, and we don't think that it will be impossible to solve in a smart way. It's just that we haven't chosen how smart.
No, and it's just that the more we use it, the more you can see that it might be a good thing to have a, go back and look at how to improve it. And I also found out actually that there's a similar issue that might be going on with this, and that will be solved by the same way. I realized that in some situations, if you have a UI with several nodes in the view model, and then you do undo on the whole echo space, the turnkey optimizer for sending stuff to the client don't properly clean out all the data that has been there. No one will ever know, but it's kind of an unpretty thing. If you have a rule in the client that actually looks at the nodes in Java, in the Java client, so those are not cleaned out. So if you have a rule that looks at that for turning on and off UI parts, that it doesn't turn it off again. So it's like, fringe things really, but that's what you have to work with, right? Fixing fringe things, because who could have thought that would be an issue ever, but now it is. So
yeah.
Everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say that, because fringe thing is a thing that always pop up.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that behind this UI we have this information tree that is pretty much everything in the view model expanded as a non-cyclic tree, and if I were to do undo on stuff, it's not necessarily so that this JavaScript object is fully destroyed, and as such, if some logic is watching this, it will.
I think actually in this view you wouldn't even notice this, because this would be correct, but it's not sending out. Well, because this is data bound on this client side, right? Well, then it might show here. But yeah, there's like residual JavaScript objects that are not entirely cleaned out if you have a multi-node, multi-level view model.
I guess we're not the first web application that leaves residual JavaScript objects.
No, I know, but we have high standards.
Yeah. Good.
That's the thing you can do if you're not doing things for one-offs. If you have like an engine that treats everything the same, you can polish on the details. I just noticed that this, in certain situations where you undo changes, you don't get back to the exact same UI look. So that's how I noticed. But if I do undo here, it should go back to be exactly the same, and it's not, and then I found out that there are some residual JavaScript objects that are not properly undone from the client. I mean, if you create new things, it will replace it, so then you won't notice. But
yeah. And another thing that we are working on a bit on the back burner is to what we want to do is to provide a sort of a generic installable Android and iOS application as a host for in the first run just the turnkey web client. So what's the benefit of that? Well, if we're an installed app, we get some access to messaging and things like that, so that we want to be able to make use to send push messages on turned off applications. As it is now, we can of course send messages to turned on applications, but who's to say that the user has it turned on on the mobile? So what we are doing, what we want to use for that is the MAUI framework, which is the latest incarnation of multi-platform, multi-UI platform for Windows. So this sort of alludes to the fact that we should be able to produce one code base for all of these platforms. Not so sure that it really will work, but it will more or less work. So one good thing about this is that we don't always need to go over the mobile devices. We can test run it towards a Windows machine, and then it's much more fast to compile and to get to run. It's still not super fast, but so in this case I've just tested to actually draw something with graphics, which has been a hard thing with MAUI before, but the newer versions are okay. It's hard to do anything interactive still. And here's a web view hosting a normal turnkey application. So this is how it could proof of concept that we can have an included web client, which uses the Edge latest sort of greenfield deploy in here. So in the end, this would sort of be a small application. Gonna size things differently, of course, but that's sort of what we try to do, is to have one fixed application that you may use to parameterize to send in your application here, so that we could reuse much of the same logic, because it's really cumbersome to set up the messaging between an arbitrary phone device and your backend system, and it's totally different on iOS and Android and Windows. So there are middleware things provided for us for doing this, but still with the middleware things like Azure Message Hub, it's still pages and pages of settings, it feels like.
And when we talked about this, the reason that we use a web browser like this is, of course, that we want to minimize the amount of time you have to redo or tweak a UI again into looking good. And we think that most users today will not need an offline experience, so that they can be in a cave or on an airplane and use MDriven built apps, because they are usually anyway dependent on connecting to something to show anything meaningful.
Yeah, and
so at least
and if the need arises for an offline app, the strategy is to have a separate model for that, and everything offline is in one small model running the whole logic on the phone itself and saving either to an SQLite database or an XML file. So that will work. And once you need to sync between the server-based app and the local model, you would use the REST APIs and possibly the Tyson logic with and the JSON information trees based on the view models. So that would be a neat way to actually sync part of the data that the user has changed locally back and forth. So we're not looking into anything like a magic bullet that sort of works offline and when it comes online does some magic and everything is in sync, because I don't think there's a theoretical basis for doing that. That's just pure luck if it's possible, or a very limited use case.
This one would basically, so it's there. That's like two different project paths for our customer, for you that are app developers. If you want to go offline and possible, then that's like one project that's for that local UI inside the phone, and then there's a server thing. But this one that is online would be basically a plug-in thing. You just get this app, you configure it to run with your app, and it will wrap it, it will message help you, but it will still use the same UI. So it's like a drop-in app thing for people who don't require offline access, because of offline and native phone in that sense it's like that's a different take on app development.
Yeah.
Yeah, also for the, I don't know if we talked about that previously, but the turnkey and MDriven server will most likely be more and more core focused, or not even have support for the old, because the more you try to do today, the harder it gets with the old framework. Everything that comes with good performance, ease of installation, deployment, containers, runtime systems, everything is .NET Core. So I would say that it's not that far away that we have to basically drop it, because it's just cumbersome for anyone that wants to go that way. And I don't think it will be that hard for people using turnkey or to recompile and use .NET Core. But so please
yeah, make room for that in your plans.
Otherwise.
Yeah, because now it's already .NET 7, and so it's 5, 6, and 7 that we sort of haven't really fully made use of, and I think it has been smart to pass on .NET 5 at least, because things weren't really, we let others go first and find the mines and blow them up. So I think it's a pretty smooth sail now when we're on .NET 7.
And it comes with really interesting simplifications in the runtime and the deployment options. So it internalizes a lot of the mixed bag of code base, you could say, that you have on IIS, and wraps it much tighter, and it gives better or simpler at least runtime control to the app developers, that is us, that are developing. So we have more of the processing pipelines available, and it's you don't need to pull everything in, you just pull in what you need in, and then I think we would also be able to have more configuration options when it comes to how you want to run your application, like memory use, queue lengths, how aggressively you want to process requests and things like that. And I think also it will be easier for us to adapt to a multi-instance if you run and if you scale up and down your application. There is better support for how to do logging, for example, on if you have many. If you're scaling up and down, you need to separate the different instances that you're running. So the more I look at it, the more attractive it looks to be in
hurry
that
on.
space. Yeah.
Hurry up. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So maybe we should wrap it up a few minutes early tonight, and
Well, about 1 minute.
yeah. Oh, all right. I looked at the video time, so that was 5 minutes. So good. We have held the time. Thank you very much for showing up tonight, and hope to see you in 2 weeks, and we will find out something extremely cool to talk about. I'm sure of it.
And please have questions so we don't talk over you. So it's like, yeah, I want to have this 10 minutes question time. You can say that up front so we don't just babble on.
Yeah. Good. See you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good evening.
you.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye bye.
you. Bye.